Hey, this is Ronan O'Shea. You're watching Airey Brothers right here on Met Radio.
Cool.
Boom.
Cool.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's an honor to have you in studio, have the head honcho.
Yeah, so, I mean, we know you from coming in here, but for the people that are listening, the fans of the Airey Brothers, just give us your elevator pitch as to what it is you do here, what you're responsible for, and then we'll get into your journey and how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the assistant director of Met Media, and we are the Office of Student Media at MSU Denver. So we've got TV, radio, newspaper, and magazine production, about 150 students. And as you guys obviously know, we accept students from all three schools on campus here. So we are directly affiliated with MSU Denver, but we work with students from CCD and UCD, providing really an opportunity to improve your communication skills, your media literacy, your technology comfort in an area that you want, whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want to write about, whatever you feel like exploring, you have the opportunity to do that up here. We're co-curricular, so we work a little bit with academic programs on campus, but we're also independent of that. Nobody up here is receiving grades or anything like that. So I've been in this role for about 3.5 years. I also teach with the sport management program here at MSU Denver. So I teach a sport media operations class, which really explores for sport management students the business of sport media. And there's a lot of money in things like podcasting and sports broadcasting and major media outlets. So it's very interesting. I think that, for me, this job came at a really interesting time in my life. I was 28. I was moving out of broadcasting myself. And I kind of wanted to move west. I have lived in a lot of different parts of the country, but I wanted to come to Colorado. That was a place that I've just had my eye on. So the fact that Steve gave me the opportunity to come to MSU Denver, I get to work with some of the more interesting students, I think, in the country. And I also get to teach a little bit. It's been really rewarding for me. Yeah.
So let's reverse engineer that.
Okay.
So I want to get into the teaching of the sport management, the broadcasting and that sort of stuff. But let's... you said you've had kind of, as probably a lot of us do, we have a calling, or we maybe came to Colorado and the mountains spoke to us. So where were you before you came here? And like reverse engineer that to, I think it started in Chicago in that general area, and everything else in between.
Yeah, that's right. So born and raised in Chicago, really, really fortunate to live in the city when I was growing up.
Like
I learned
in this actual city.
Yeah, within the city. We weren't downtown. We were on the north side, but it was certainly urban living. It was a community. You knew your neighbors. You walked down the street and you saw every face you could imagine. The diversity in Chicago is something that is one of the great strengths of that city, and it was great. I mean, my dad was an engineer. Retired now, but one of the things that he did when we were kids, I have 2 older brothers, is we'd walk out and get like ice cream on a Friday night or something after dinner, and I was maybe 6, and he'd say, "Hey, tell me how to get home. You're leading us home today." And that helped me understand how cities work and how directions work, and knowing how things function. It really opened my eyes to that. Moved out to the burbs after that, and that was a whole different ballgame, moving to a place where people were afraid of Chicago. And I remember having buddies in like junior high, and I'm like, "Hey, let's go to the Cubs game. We're going to take the train." And their parents were like, "You're not getting on a train without parental supervision. What are you going to see on the train?" So that was really eye-opening for me, and I got to experience both. The thing, though, that really happened in high school, being in the suburbs, my high school had a TV and radio station that broadcast in the community. So at like 15, I had a radio show. I was broadcasting Glenbrook South High School, like football and basketball games, and I was actually doing TV sportscasting that I could go home at night, put on Channel 26, and there I was. It was very, very interesting when you're in those developmental years. So that set the tone for me. I went to Indiana University for my undergrad in Bloomington, Indiana.
Go Hoosiers.
Big Indiana fan, and all student media. Like I was the sports director of the TV station and the radio station. I created a weekly 30-minute TV sportscast that is in its 17th season right now. It has long outlived me, which is so cool to see that come along. But so I was doing all the broadcasting, covering games, really covering Indiana University sports.
Did you ever cover the Little 500?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I'll have to show you. I've got some clips meeting Barack Obama at Little 500 in 2008. Maybe it was 07, but in that time frame, Little 500 is just one of those unbelievable traditions in college, and the fact that it was in Bloomington, Indiana, and you had the frat racers and then the local racers,
Cutters.
the Cutters, exactly right. It's awesome.
It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah,
we grew up on that movie.
Well, and the tradition too, and to see, I mean, Bloomington, Indiana is such a special place. Indiana's a weird state. And then you've got this oasis right in the middle of it. I sort of think, not that Austin and Bloomington are the same in terms of size, but I always thought that Austin was this weird oasis in the middle of Texas. Bloomington's sort of that way, although it's a college town. It isn't a major city, in that it's just so different, and it's different geographically. When the glaciers came down, most of Indiana's flat. It stopped right about at Bloomington. So that's where you've got rolling hills and just beautiful, beautiful part of the country. And the rest of the state is more like Illinois, where just farm corn and soy and stuff like that. But I was really involved with media, and I was working a lot in student media as a student journalist. Got out of Indiana. I went to the University of South Florida for a year. It was my first job out of school. I was broadcasting, video services guy. Yeah, the Bulls. But and talk about a change of pace. Bloomington, Indiana to Tampa, Florida.
Yeah.
A lot of growth with that. Did that for a year. Worked for a computer company in Chicago for a year. Weird type of transitional position. Then I went to Illinois State University. They gave me this unbelievable opportunity where they paid for me. Yeah, we're the Redbirds.
Okay.
Yeah. Normal, Illinois, smack dab right in the middle of the state, where I worked for the athletic department, and then they paid for my master's degree. They covered my sport management master's. It's called a graduate assistantship. So I did all the video for the athletic department. I was broadcasting games. I was doing communications, media relations for the football program and the baseball program. So a lot of travel, a lot of calling games, a lot of multimedia production during the day, and then going to class at night. And a lot of growth happened during that time too. After that, I worked for the Big East Digital Network, a little bit of freelance, and was really in a tough spot. I wasn't finding work. I was burning out a little bit on the broadcasting side of things. One of the things that stood out to me is, earlier in my 20s, is I met a lot of people in the media industry that worried me. I saw guys in their 40s covering high school football on a Friday night in some small town in central Illinois. And I said, I don't want to do that. Like, I love broadcasting games, and I love working with coaches and student athletes and all that, but I don't want to do that. And at some point down the road, if a family is in my plans, that isn't going to work with me covering a high school football game on Friday night. I also think that there's a ton of narcissism in media. You know, I loved broadcasting. I didn't love the other broadcasters a lot of the time. And so I was thinking, how is this? Yeah, it feels good to me to get a job or to be on air in Chicago doing a live halftime show or something in Chicago. But what am I providing other than, it's a paycheck for me? And that was a conflict I was really having internally. And I thought, I want to do something more than just something that helps me. And that's how higher ed popped on my radar. How can I take the life experiences that I've had and apply it to something that goes beyond just me? And I thought about, teaching. I thought about administrative roles where I could work with students in media that might be where I was at 10 years ago. And I could help them. I could help them prepare for their first job. I could be a resource for them during these transitional years being a college student. So I started looking for media positions, and this magical place, MSU Denver, what is that? What's Metropolitan State University of Denver? Never heard of it in my life. It popped up, and I said I need to give that an honest go. Another thing too, just to backtrack a little bit, when I finished grad school, I was pretty burned out. It was 2 years I was traveling with the football team in the fall, a little bit with men's and women's basketball in the winter, and then the baseball team all spring, plus going to class, plus working in the office. There was a stretch in the spring where I would go 45, 50 days without a day off. I was tired. What I did right when I got out is I bought a 1 week trip to Denver. The Cubs were playing the Rockies at Coors. Had to go see that. Two of my favorite artists were co-headlining a show in Boulder at the Fox, all within like 2 days of each other. And I said, look, if this isn't a sign, you got to go and do it. Booked a flight, came out here, and had a couple of days in Denver, a couple of days up in Boulder, got some hiking in, got to just sort of envision what would it be like for me to live here. And that's when I was like, I need to make this happen. And this is the time to do it. I'm in my late 20s. I'm not tied down by anything. If I'm going to make a jump, let's do it now. and did it. And, I moved to Colorado. I waited till I got the job. It took about a year from coming out here to making this work with Met Media. And I came out to Colorado not knowing a single person. And it's been one of the best experiences of my life. Good moments and bad moments, but the growth that I've experienced, the people that I've met, that's something, if I hadn't done it, I could have stayed in Chicago. I would have been fine. I've got my family's back home. I've got a great friend network back home. Chicago's an amazing city. But I know 5-10 years down the road, I would have said, man, why didn't I take that chance when I could have? And that's where we're at. And in that weird roundabout way, it led me to guys like you, too. It's been rewarding seeing what you guys have been able to build in here and to see where it goes. Yeah,
we're stoked. We love it here. And, he came home one day and was like, there's like a radio studio there. Do you think I should go in and ask? And I was like, yeah. And then he came home and he's like, they want a proposal of what we do. And so I just put our heads together and got the whiteboard out. And then so here we are. And it's been great because we've been trying to do a podcast format since 2012, both being in different locations. So timing, with consistency wasn't always there. And then there was always that kind of self-consciousness of not really having the proper equipment to put out like the sound quality of the call-ins, because we were doing it remotely. So my voice would be at a different level than his. So that kind of held us back a little bit. But so when now that we've been able to come in here, it's like we're in heaven.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy to hear you, say that. And that's what this place exists to do. We welcome anybody on campus who wants to come in. There's rules you got to follow, of course, but we don't censor on Met Radio, for example. There's other shows here where you can do 2 hours of, for example, uncensored hip hop. You don't get that type of freedom once you get off of a college campus unless you're doing it on your own. And we want to empower students to come up here with whatever your interest is and come and apply it and let us help you. Let us teach you how to make a podcast, how to get that started, how do you edit audio. These are skill sets that I think can apply to so many industries beyond just journalism or communication, that come and do it with something you're interested in learning about. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions on this campus. People go, oh, people just want to work for a newspaper if they work for you. That's not remotely close to true. And the vast majority of our students here who have a podcast or write for the paper, they're not going to go get a job at a newspaper. What they want to do is they want to work on their communication skills. They want to be able to go into an interview and not just say, hey, I've got strong writing skills, but hand the potential employer 5 published articles that they've written this year and say, look, here's the work that I actually do. The job market is so competitive in any industry right now. You have to bring something unique to the table. And I think this office empowers students to do that and do it without all of the politics and nonsense that is all over higher ed and limiting free speech, which we see so much of that on college campuses. We're trying to push against that up here. And yeah, it ruffles feathers, but we know that we're giving students a platform to better themselves for whatever career they're going into.
So you just touched on, limited free speech. Of course, on a college campus, there might be things that the college might not want to get out, but as a newspaper, as a media source, that's kind of our job.
Yeah.
You have any examples of a time where the college and Met Media kind of butted heads on those situations?
Absolutely. I think about right now, we're seeing this a little bit. The West Classroom story here on campus, where there's a classroom in the heart of campus that multiple employees have, within a short period of time, been diagnosed with cancer. So is it a coincidence, or is it alarming that 3 people in the exact same office have been diagnosed with aggressive forms of cancer? Some of these buildings are old. The building that we're in right now, parts of this building was built in 1882. There's a lot of funky stuff on this campus. So our students are trying to uncover what's going on here. And it's difficult to go to the president's office or marketing communications or AHEC, which runs this building, and say, are you keeping us safe? That's a weird position for a student to be in. Another story that I think back on a couple of years ago, the former men's basketball coach here got a DUI on campus. He had been drinking on campus. He walked out barefoot to his car on campus, was driving away and got pulled over by Airey PD and got arrested with a DUI. All right, this is the men's basketball coach, one of the highest paid positions in the athletic department, one of the higher paid positions on campus.
Yeah.
Of course it's our responsibility to report on that. And it was not his first DUI. So there was a pattern of concerning behavior. If I get a DUI, I don't think I'm back on Monday. He had been employed up to this point. So we ran into a real conflict with the athletic department where they were saying, some of our students write for the paper or broadcast games for Met Radio, and they also do volunteer work for the athletic department. Well, the athletic department doesn't want you to cover this. We need you to cover this because it's your responsibility as a journalist. There's a lot of conflict that comes up from that. And what a great lesson, though, for a student to learn. And the student who really broke that story, he's now in his final year of becoming a lawyer. He's out at Creighton in law school. And he looks back, we talked maybe a year and a half ago, and he said that was really a defining time for him doing that story and seeing the pushback he got when really on a college campus, I think that type of discipline to tell that story correctly and the confidence to do something like that against a powerful figure on campus, that should be celebrated. And oftentimes it isn't. And students get pushed out. Going back to the cancer story, we had a student here just getting the roundabout, sending emails, trying to get someone to interview on camera for his story. And, I can't talk to you, this person will. You email that person, I won't talk to you, this person will. And you're just getting the roadrunner runaround or something like that. But a good lesson for him in perseverance in trying to get it done. So, yeah, there's a lot of conflict that arises. And then you'd be surprised, too, about conflicts with academic departments who don't see the value in what we're doing here or question how we do things the way we do up here, and that's just part of it, I think. Yeah.
What? You go, Rich.
I was just going to say, was it a winning basketball coach?
He had success early in his career. Last couple of years got a little lean, and then that was a huge distraction, and I think the DUI on campus is about the final straw at that point. Because, again, I mean, I'm a administrator and affiliate instructor, and I'm certain if I got arrested on campus that you wouldn't see me next week.
So as far as the administration, obviously they don't want us reporting negative, right? But they know how important it is for students to learn real journalism and report the facts and not what they think. Is there support from the administration in the long run, or is there always going to be that little bit of a pushback because, hey, we don't want people to know our coach got a DUI, or hey, we don't want people to know they're getting cancer on campus?
Sure. It's a give and take. I couldn't sit here and tell you that they don't support us when we get about $400,000 a year in student fees to fund full-time staff, equipment. We got to pay for everything we see in here. So there's very clearly support in the sense that we have a budget that we can work with. We're allowed to be here in the student union. But there's a lot of people on this campus who don't understand what we do. We fall under student affairs, for example, with a lot of departments, immigrant services, migrant services. We don't really fit that type of a mold, yet we're grouped in with them. So we're sort of this unique office that sits up here. I mentioned being co-curricular. So like I said, we don't give out grades, but there are certain classes that meet up here in our space. The class that I teach with sport management, one of their assignments, I have them come into this room and record a podcast. So in the past, it was just, use your cell phone and record yourself talking. I want to get them in a studio. It's a different vibe, as you guys can tell. So it's mixed. And there's a lot of questions about where will we end up in the long run. At a lot of schools, a program like this would be in the journalism program. It's not the case here. And we think that's a great value because we want to serve more than just journalism students or students like, this group. You're not even at MSU Denver, and we want you up here, and we see the value in what you're doing up here. I also think that with that comes a benefit to everybody in the office, meaning if it's just journalism students up here, it's the same people you're in class with. You see the same people for 3 or 4 years. We've got business students up here. We've got kinesiology students up here. We've got graphic design students. We have people from all 3 schools. We have 18-year-olds. We have people in their 50s in here, and they're all students in the newsroom. That's a diverse newsroom, not unlike what you see when you get a first job, but very different than what I saw at Indiana when everybody was pretty much 18 to 22. So this place is very unique, on this campus. Our newspaper goes back 40 years. There's not a lot of things on this campus that have 40 years of history to go with it. And we're very proud of that. And I hope there's another 40 years of the Metropolitan.
Yeah. You said when you came out to Colorado, you had that the Rockies-Cubs game.
Yeah.
You had the concerts. You did a little bit of hiking. Were you always an outdoor person before you got out here? Was that kind of thing that were you going jumping into the quarries up in?
No, boy, huge missed opportunity at IU. Looking back on that, big regret that I have, even with my undergrad experience in general, is I was so hyper focused on broadcasting, getting internships. I didn't take enough time, I think, as an undergrad to be a student. And I think that messed me up a little bit later down the road. But I started in grad school to really open up to outdoors. I always was drawn to like the mountains. I'm from Illinois. We have hills. The biggest hill in the town my parents live in, Glenview, it was a garbage dump that they capped and put a golf course on top, right?
Nice.
A couple hundred feet in the air. That's the mountain in Glenview, Illinois. So I even remember looking back in like social studies class in like high school and seeing, the West and going, man, that it just looks like this mysterious place. So I was always drawn to it. And my work up to this point has primarily been in the Midwest or East Coast, all over Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, up and down the eastern seaboard and then the Midwest. That the West was still sort of this exotic place that I hadn't gotten to. Another thing that really stuck with me in grad school was this thought of a work-life balance that was really hard for me to sustain in broadcasting. Working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then calling a baseball series that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There was no time to get outside. So once I got towards the end of grad school, I really got into biking. And I was doing freelance work that I had the time. I had hours during the day to go out and bike, and I was biking 40, 50 miles a day up Lake Michigan, this path called the Oak Leaf Trail on the coast of Lake Michigan in eastern Wisconsin, near Milwaukee, and just up and down. And I started thinking about, okay, I want to get away from broadcasting. One of the benefits to working in higher ed is it's not quite a 9 to 5, but I knew I would have nights and weekends to at least control my own time. And I wanted to live somewhere that I would enjoy the work-life balance. So the reason that Colorado stood out to me is I'd gone camping once in my life before I moved out here. And now it's one of my favorite things in the world to do. It's critical to my mental health, I think, just getting out of town, putting the phone off, and disappearing. So I wanted to find a place that I could enjoy my work, feel satisfied in the work I was doing. But then when I'm not working, there would be things that I'm into. So we got a huge playground here in Colorado, obviously. People in Colorado that are into that, people that value their fitness, people that want to go out and explore. But the other side of my life, sports, being a fan, and music. Like, this is the perfect place. We got all the major sports in America here, and the Cubs come here at least once a year. One of the best jam band scenes, I think, in the country is here in Colorado, and that's right up my wheelhouse. And then all the outdoor stuff. And you put that together, and I feel more balanced now than I did really at any point up to this point, where it was just work, and always thinking about the next job or the next internship or the next opportunity. Now I take a lot more time and say, I'm going to shut off my phone for the next 72 hours, and there's nothing I need until Monday. So I'm going to go do something and just go.
You go.
Yeah.
Off the grid.
Yeah. And we were talking about that before on air, a trip this weekend that I've been eyeing this all summer, and the campground's been closed because of a fire, and now it's ready to go, and hopefully I'm the only one up there.
So do you have a tent, or do you have like a bivvy?
No, just
hammock?
a tent. The hammock is something I need to get because it looks good. And the thing that I notice here in Denver is it's getting harder and harder in parks in Denver to put them up on trees because they're on it. You got to take that thing down. You're damaging the trees.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Over by me, I'm downtown, Commons Park and Confluence Park, which is just primed to set up a hammock and sit out there for a couple hours. And the parks crew comes around and cuts that down. But yeah, I got a little tent, and I just like to. I got a book and some podcasts, and I'm going to go up there. And the place I'm going this weekend is right at the trailhead, about a 13-mile up and back with about a 2,500-foot incline. And there's a lake and mountain. I mean, it's just gorgeous, and your phone doesn't work at any point up there. So it's a perfect place this last real weekend before the school year gets going to kind of get out, and then starting next week, it's full steam ahead preparing for the fall semester and class and all that.
Cool.
But it was great. I mean, like I said, I camped once in Indiana. I took a hiking class. It was a 1-credit class my senior year, and we went out into the Brown County woods or Monroe County woods, wherever it was down there near Bloomington, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to pitch a tent, and to see how far I've come in this time, I'm proud of that. You know, I hope that makes sense. Is that this was something that we grew up in the city. You know, we did urban things. You know, my parents were great about the ideal road trip, like with my dad when we were a kid, is where are the Cubs playing this week? And they're in Pittsburgh. Let's go to Pittsburgh for a couple days and see a couple games. Let's go to Cincinnati or Detroit or Milwaukee or wherever. But we didn't do a lot of outdoor stuff, not a lot of camping. So to get into that in your late 20s, maybe I have a different perspective than someone who grew up with it.
Yeah, we can relate. We kind of grew up as runners, but not really much outdoors besides, going to a park, running on a trail. And I still haven't really done much camping, but really haven't done much
ever.
I camped in Montana.
That was wrestling camp.
No, we camped at the lake, but whatever. After being in Leadville for summer and getting up on 14ers, just the appreciation for the state and the ability to go out, and you're seriously on another planet. You know, like you said, your cell phone doesn't work, whatever podcast you store, whatever songs you store, but you can kind of just go get that peace of mind and detach. Yeah. And I can definitely relate to you with that, and growing up not doing that and having a greater appreciation for it at this time in my life.
And I just value, like, being outside. You know, we're in a windowless office up here. That drives me crazy. And I love weather. I'm kind of a weather nerd. I like seeing storms roll in. That was one of the great benefits of growing up in the Midwest in grad school. When you're in central Illinois and a storm comes, it's like Independence Day. The whole sky lights up and you see the thing come in. And you can step outside and you can feel the energy in the air that something's coming, and no pun intended, it's like electric. Like you feel it in your blood, and I'm drawn to that. And I feel that way on a mountain, and maybe it's because I was never exposed to that. I was never ever exposed to higher elevation, and then you get up above a tree line, and it's hard to describe that feeling to people back home. You're physically on a spot of the earth where you're so exposed, and trees can't even grow that high up. And the weather patterns are different, and the way the wind blows is different, and the way your body feels, your heartbeat, your lungs, you feel more alive almost. And it's good to get that perspective. And when you're up on top of like a 14er, everything looks so small down here. Or it's not uncommon. I mean, even going up to like Boulder and going up by the Flatirons, and you look down on the city of Boulder and go, look at how small that looks compared to this giant slab of rock to my left. It's very good in getting a sense of where you are. And I feel the same way with camping. We don't get stars in Chicago because of all the light pollution like you get here. And I remember the first time I went camping out by Rabbit Ears, north central Colorado, middle of nowhere in terms of cities. I've never seen a sky like that in my life. And if that doesn't humble you and make you just kind of step back and go, you're part of a thing that is so much bigger than you can even comprehend, then you're not, I don't know how present you are if you don't take time to do that. And it's so easy to be distracted. Your phone can distract you all day, but it's good to step back and to see your place on the planet, see your place in the universe even, and go, wow, you're really small in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I mean, we grew up at the Jersey Shore, mile from the ocean, and those sorts of activities were never really fostered. They were kind of like, you don't want to do that. So like the running and that sort of stuff was always encouraged. And then the ocean never really did anything to me as it does to some people. And it puts it in perspective for me. But when you go to 14,000 feet and you can, you're at Mount Elbert just outside of Leadville, and you can see the Pikes Peak in Colorado Springs, it's like, I always tell people it lets you know you're alive. Yeah. Just hiking to 14,000 feet, 3, 4, 5, 10 miles, whatever it may be. it's going to get your heart pumping. And if a storm comes in, when you're above tree line, your hair is going to stand up.
No question.
That's a fact.
I think that vulnerability is a good thing because you're so safe, especially in a city, in the sense that, like, you go to a grocery store, all your food is there. You've got just so many people around you. There's maybe a comfort in numbers. And then when you go to a place where you're isolated and, the weather, suddenly you're vulnerable to the weather. You don't really feel that in a city for the most part. Maybe flooding, or if there's hail or something and you're outside. But when you're standing on the side of a mountain and a storm rolls in, or even not lightning, just rain, you get a sense of how exposed you are that I think harkens back to our ancestors. And that's what human beings, in the grand scheme of things, forever they had to worry about protection and shelter and the elements. And we're so protected from that, living in a city, that it's good to be reminded of how vulnerable we are. And that brings up kind of another point too, is moving out here has really changed my perspective on hunting, for example. I've eaten meat my whole life. My connection to meat is going to a grocery store and seeing a styrofoam package that apparently was a living animal, right, and throwing it on the stove or on the grill and eating it. And I think when you get out and you see how elk interact with each other or other animals, or you're out hiking and you see maybe the remnants of a kill of a mountain lion that had gotten to a deer or an elk or something, that's pretty good to look at that and to think about how all of this really works. And my perspective of hunting, I always had the stereotype of, just someone out in the woods drinking beer with a shotgun, just killing animals. It's the furthest thing from the hunters and things I've met here, and people that are in that community completely changed my perspective on that. I was completely ignorant to the respect that they have for nature and the value that it has, and what a hypocrite I am to go and get a burger and think of hunting as this terrible thing. So it's been good. A lot of the notions that I had, I've tried to challenge. Even with, like, the camping, I always thought, what's the point in sleeping in the woods? Oh, I get it now. And it's so valuable. I can't imagine moving forward this not being part of my life. And if it's not, I don't think I'm going to be doing very well with it. Because even, like, when you're out camping for multiple days, your body clock changes. And that's something... inside, lights are on, screens are on. My body's all messed up, and when I should be going to sleep and when I'm not. And when you're outside, you get tired at 9 because it's dark. And then you're up at 5 because the sun's coming up and birds are going. And it seems I feel better after that than when I'm on my normal routine here, which has me up till 1 or 2 in the morning and then getting up at 6 to go to work,
Yeah.
So
balances the adrenals.
Yeah. And it also highlights, like, how weird it is that with cities and with electricity, we've completely changed even the time that humans are active. In a very short period of time, we've drastically changed the way that our species live. That's interesting to me. It's interesting to explore that and to see it with myself, how my body reacts to certain things that I do. Yeah.
You mentioned, we've been talking about grad school and stuff.
Yeah.
When were you at IU?
I was at Indiana from fall of 2005 to December of 2009.
did you follow any wrestling when you were there?
They had a fantastic wrestling program. When I first got to Indiana, and I couldn't quite cover men's basketball yet because I was a freshman, it was volleyball and wrestling that I spent a lot of my time with. A great program, and obviously the Big Ten with Iowa, just really, really good wrestling in that part of the country.
Does the name Joe Dubuque ring a bell?
I can't put a name on it. That seems to...
He was a 2-time NCAA champ at 125 pounds.
And then after him, they had Angel Escobedo, who was a 2-time.
That name definitely is in my head. And wrestling is... I wrestled, believe it or not, I wrestled in junior high.
Right on.
And my only claim to fame with that is I had the quickest pin in Maple junior high history.
Hell yeah.
I took a kid down in 6 seconds. And then he kind of had an asthma attack, so I don't know if I did it or if he was just
Win's
not doing
a win.
well.
There's no asterisk next to that in there.
I should be in the Maple Hall of Fame at some point, right? But actually, wrestling is a sport too that tremendous respect for people that do that, and I think the typical even sports fan does not have the appreciation for the discipline required to be an elite college wrestler, for example. It's unbelievable what they have to put themselves through, and it's a great sport. It's a really, really great strategic sport. Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah. And in my opinion, IU has one of the best uniforms in in college. They have it's got like candy stripes, you know, like on the back, so it's red, white. I really like their uniform.
Classic look.
The other question I have for you was, as someone who actually grew up in the city, how do you feel about people that live 50 miles away, but then when they're out in public tell people they're from said city or said location?
You know, that's funny. It's actually really funny that you mentioned that, because it's not that I've forgotten about that. It's just so interesting. I'm going to spin that just a little bit. The thing I hear here that I don't think I ever heard growing up in Chicago is, where are you from? Are you a native or a transplant? And I'm sick of hearing that. One, because we're all, in the grand scheme of things, we're all
natives.
Yeah, we're all transplants, right? Like, just because you fell out here, you know, you're lucky. You're very lucky if this is the place that you grew up in. But it's such a part of the culture here, is you're either one of us or you're an outsider, and then maybe you're okay, or maybe we want you to leave, depending on who you are and where you're coming from. It's also anti-inclusive, which is ironic when, you know, I think of Boulder a lot. They want to be progressive, open people until you want to move to Boulder. Then they don't want you to have anything to do with them, and that's interesting to me. But I think that I don't have a problem with people who say, I'm from Chicago and they're from Naperville. There's pride in where they're from. And I think, at least in Chicago compared to here, no one cares where you're from. They care in the sense like, well, tell me, what's it like? Or you're bringing part of your culture to our city, and Chicago is so much more diverse than Denver. So I kind of like that feel back home, whereas here I roll my eyes a little bit, like, who cares if I'm from Chicago or Denver? I'm here now, and this is my community, and I want to make my community better. And I think we push a lot of people out with that type of native sticker on the car and all that nonsense.
Yeah, my whole thing is, like, our goal has always been get out of New Jersey, get out of Point Pleasant.
Sure.
And then you see that sticker, Colorado, born and bred. So it's like, you've never been anywhere else. You've never experienced anywhere else. That's kind of where I come at from that. And like you said, we all foreign, right? We all came from different places. So why can't we share? Touching on something you just said, though, you know, Chicago's a very diverse city, right? And you told us why you love Denver, all the things you can do. You go out on a mountain, you can go see some jam bands, stuff like that. How does Denver rank to Chicago as a city?
Sure. So this is what I tell people back home. Chicago is just in almost every way better than Denver in terms of food, culture, all that stuff. Architecture, for sure. Colorado to Illinois, come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that I like Denver. I don't want people to come away from this and go, man, he hates where he lives. That's the furthest thing from the truth. I get frustrated a little bit with Denver in, you can't get food late night downtown. There's a couple of spots. Go over to Colfax, and Pete's or something like that is open 24 hours. I live by Coors Field. You can't get anything past midnight. And it's like, we're downtown. That's crazy to me. And a lot of chains, and there's not a lot of, at least in the downtown portion of Denver, those mom and pop authentic stores where you can pop in and get authentic Vietnamese food, or like, I have not found good Chinese yet in Denver. Maybe I haven't found the right place. But that's something that every time I go home and I hop on like the Red Line, it's just instantly like, wow, this is what diversity is like. You see everybody, you hear every language, you can get off at any train stop and get any type of food in the world almost at any time of the day. And I think there's a lot of value in that. But I do like Denver. It's an interesting time to be here. I looked at pictures recently, the neighborhood that I live in. I looked at pictures of it when the apartment that I live in was opened in 2001. What was there and what it looks like now, and it's unbelievable. And even in the 3.5 years I've been here over by Union Station, a lot of those were lots, gravel lots when I moved here, and now it's luxury apartment, condo, spas, all that other kind of stuff, Whole Foods and different things like that. But it's interesting to see the city evolve, and I don't know what Denver's going to look like in 10 years, but I'm eager to see. And I'm interested in things like urban development, architecture, how cities have their neighborhoods or sections of culture. Like, looking back to Chicago, a vast Chinatown where you're almost in a different country when you go over to it. All these different sort of ethnic neighborhoods that you can go to and find really good Greek food or Italian food, and not chains, but like mom and pop stores that have been in the family for 50, 60, 70 years, and you know you're going to get a real good dish when you go in there. I'm having a hard time finding a lot of that here, but I got to keep exploring and finding it. And the hope would be that as more people move here, you bring elements of where you come from and you can add to the flavor, the melting pot of Denver. But Colorado to Illinois, come on. And I miss Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan is the one thing that we don't really have water here, certainly not on that scale. But the mountains are every single day, no matter cloudy, sunny, hot or cold, I look out of those mountains and it's just like, that's why I'm here. And this weekend's a perfect example of get out of here and within 30 minutes, I'm in a whole different place. And then keep going and it just changes on and on. Yeah. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, and we'll see what Colorado looks like in another 50 years. In the grand scheme of things, at least American civilizations here, we haven't been here that long. And you see that in the architecture in the city. There's not a lot of really old buildings in Denver versus like a place like Boston or New York or any of the places you're familiar with on the East Coast. But eventually we'll get to that point. And ironically enough, this is one of the oldest buildings in Denver, and it's a cool office to come in here and go, imagine the people who worked in this building 100 years ago. We can do that. We can go back more than 100 years, and what lives did they have? And there's pictures of them scattered about the building, and sometimes I just look at those and go, what was this person's reality life, and what would it be like if that person stood right here today? They wouldn't comprehend what has happened to this building and this campus.
Yeah, we get that same kind of being up in Leadville.
Yeah.
That was the boom. They wanted to make that the capital of Colorado in the late 1800s. Being there for one winter. Like, how the heck did people do this in the 1870s or the 1880s? Like, how did you get over these mountains with that horse and that carriage? Or just how did you live in the wintertime?
Yeah.
Because we had an old house that was at the mine, and they moved it into the town. And, I mean, we were wearing winter clothes, inside because it was so cold. Like, how were you doing this in the 1870s, 1880s?
Yeah, and it's crazy because we live right behind a cemetery and kind of cut through to get on the trail. You go through the cemetery. And one day, one of Richie's clients was in town, and he's like, hey, let's go look at some of these headstones. And I had never checked it out.
Yeah.
It's all babies.
Wow.
All babies. Yeah, from, late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah. You bring up such a good point, though, too. I think about that all the time. Even on, like, basic hikes, or, more even in, like, the foothills. And I go, I can't imagine the courage it took people. They had no idea. You're coming across the plains in eastern Colorado, and it's mostly flat. And then all of a sudden, there are these unimaginably large, crazy places with animals you've never seen before, with weather patterns that can change so quickly. And we see it often where Denver in January is 55 degrees and sunny. 20 miles that way, you're in a blizzard. And how many people left, at the wrong time of the year just because they didn't know, and then experienced hell, basically, in these mountains. And just unbelievable. And they were chasing these goals. Maybe they were going west for gold, or they were looking for land, or whatever they were trying to do, they were trying to improve where they were at. And I'm by no means am I as noble or courageous as those people, but I mirror that. I came this way to better where I was at in life, to expand my reality and to expand the way I thought about things. So I look fondly back on those people, and it's amazing what they did. Crazy, too. Yeah. And I never could have done that. And, maybe in our life, not to get too crazy here, but maybe in our lifetime we will see something similar to that if humans decide to colonize the moon or Mars. That's the closest thing I can think of to what our ancestors did here going west and trying to figure out how to make it work on Earth, is when our species goes past this to the next level. And those first rounds of people that go and make that trek are going to be the equivalent, I think, of what those people did 150 years ago.
Manifest destiny, baby.
That's right. That's right.
I think that's why we're all in this room right now.
For sure. Are you a deep dish guy?
Yeah, certainly. Not my favorite style of pizza back home, but I mean, there's on 16th Street here. There's a Giordano's.
Okay.
That's like my embassy now. You know, when I need a taste of home, I can go in there. But there's actually a style of pizza that's called pub style. It's more of a thin crust, and they cut it square cut. Exactly right. That is the best pizza in the world. And I got a few places back home that are the go-to, but you can't go wrong with a good deep dish pizza. And it's home, no question. But it was a twice-a-year thing for us in Chicago.
Yeah.
2 or 3 times a year you go get a deep dish. It wasn't the hey every Friday. Every Friday was the square cut bar style pizza. And again, mom and pop type shops that I haven't found that here. I've struggled to find the pizza that I want in Colorado, but we do other things better here, for sure.
Like what?
Green chili. Okay. Mexican's really good, I think, overall. And I like that I can go to a restaurant here and see elk or bison or something on it. I don't order a lot of seafood in Colorado. And the pizza, I think the bread is really the big difference. And I know at elevation it's harder to make bread good, basically, but things like bagels or sandwiches, I think they do that better on the East Coast or Midwest. And here, maybe some of the more game meat, and then just give me green chili on everything, because that I don't know that I had that before I came out here, and now it's on every meal I eat.
Right on. So we grew up in Point Pleasant, which is the home of the original Jersey Mike's.
Wow.
So that's our one and only. That's what a submarine sandwich is, a sub, a grinder, whatever you want to call it, a po' boy. Yeah. That is our that was our indoctrination of what a submarine sandwich was. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until I got to college where we started traveling for meats and stuff, and that's where Quiznos and Subway and some of these Jimmy John's, some of these other places, and so you get that first Quiznos and there's or Subway and there's one strip of cold cuts on it. You're like, what?
It's not gonna work.
I grew up on. I've been eating Jersey Mike's for almost 20 years. Yeah. So that was our what we thought of a sandwich until we started traveling around, and it's like, oh, this is. But Jimmy John's does have some pretty good bread. Mm-hmm. Jersey Mike's is our thing. What's the difference between, say, like a Coney and a Chicago style hot dog?
Well, I would think the bun is one of the most critical things, and that's my biggest pet peeve here. I go somewhere, they got a Chicago dog on the menu, get it, and there's no poppy seeds on the bun.
Poppy seed bun.
You can't even go to King Soopers or Safeway. I trust me, I've hit darn near every grocery store in Denver looking for poppy seed buns, because Italian sausage or a hot dog, without that, you're eating cardboard, in my opinion. The flavor's so critical, and I don't know why it's not standard. That's a big thing. And then the meat, the Vienna beef dog versus, there's a lot of different things you could put in a dog, different types of meat, but the beef, the primary coming from the beef, it has the right taste, the right flavor. It's got a snap too. When you bite into the hot dog, it shouldn't be mushy. You should feel the casing on it snap when you take that bite. And that's something I look for. Another type of food that I don't see a lot of here is, you got obviously the Italian sausage, but like an Italian combo where you've got Italian beef and an Italian sausage on a hoagie or on a bun. And you talk about every flavor you could want, put some peppers on that, cheese, perfect. But I don't see a lot of Italian beef as an item at places that it's at every corner shop in Chicago, for example.
And they're like dipping that in the juices.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. And it's just it like falls apart in your mouth, and it's maybe the most flavorful sandwich I think that exists, and it's hard to find. So when I go home, there's like this list of 10 restaurants that I just have to get to, and it's home for 3 days, and it's like we're eating, a little bit of pizza, a little bit of hot dog, beef, and then just seeing the city. I'd be curious for you guys. When have you been back home recently, or in the last couple of years?
Oh yeah, April.
Having the experiences you've had, and now going back to that, are there things from home that you appreciate now that maybe you took for granted at the time, or Does that make sense? Or the opposite, that you're just like, I'm really happy I'm not there anymore. Yeah.
I think a little bit of the opposite for sure. One thing I do appreciate more is New York City. We're about 90 minutes. We could seriously hop on the train in our backyard and get there if we wanted to. And just not going there that much growing up, that's kind of the only regret that I have is like, this Mecca was not that far, and I never took advantage of it. So that's kind of one regret and something I appreciate. But as far as where we're from, most of it's like, yeah, I'm kind of happy I left. You know, not to shit on it at all. You know, that's where we grew up, gave us our character. But at the end of the day, like I said before, our goal growing up was to get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in terms of local food or restaurants, stuff like that, a lot of those things that kind of make me nostalgic are things that I try to avoid eating nowadays just because I know how it makes me feel. So I mean, we have like Pete Nelda's is a thin style bar pie pizza, and they have it's called the super extra large. It's just like this ginormous like wagon wheel style, but it's very thin crust. And they have a whole pie eaters club. So if you order one by yourself and you eat it, every month they give out a different T-shirt to be in the club. So that was like the thing growing up. Like once we got our driver's license was to go there, gorge ourselves on this huge pie, and then get this double extra large T-shirt that I would never wear because it's too big for me. So things like that, and like bagels. I try to avoid those things, but I definitely there's like a couple different places. So in New Jersey, we have what's called pork roll or Taylor ham, and it's I guess the best way to describe it is kind of like a circular, almost like a sausage-style Spam, and they cut it super thin and they grill it, so you get pork roll, egg, and cheese. Yeah, like people get bacon, egg, and cheese, and so for me it was always pork roll, egg, and cheese on an everything bagel.
Man.
So that
yeah, that sounds great.
yeah, they're amazing. And there's this one bagel place by where I used to coach called Bagel Masters, and there's literally, if you don't get there early in the morning, even during the week, there's a line out the door. Yeah. You know, so those kinds of things I definitely miss. But all my friends back home, they're always like, keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. You don't ever want to come back here. Like, other than to visit, sure, like, keep doing what you're doing. You know, we love following you, love all that stuff. You ain't missing much here. And like I said, I never got into surfing. I tried to do it. It just wasn't encouraged. So for me, that would be like the only thing that and it just doesn't, you know, I'd rather drive up the road, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and go, you know, huff and puff for 2 or 3 hours to get to the top of 14,000 feet and hang out and go home.
I think you touch on a good point. You brought it up a little bit earlier, too, is that some people just stay in one place their whole life. And I'm not here to judge anybody who, for a lot of people, you're surrounded by your friends and your family. I think that's great. And you've got your community, and I'm not here to knock that. I also think, though, there's tremendous value in getting out of that and exposing yourself. Look, I'll be honest, I did not like Florida. I have no interest in ever living in Florida again. I am very grateful that I had the year to experience
Tampa.
It. Yeah, Tampa. I mean, goodness, like, I mean, the Gulf's nice. You know, the Gulf's nice.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would rather live on the Gulf Coast than on the East Coast, for sure. It's way more laid back.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad, though, like, I got down to Miami quite a bit. I got to Orlando, Jacksonville, Tallahassee. I got to see a lot of the state. And Florida's a weird state in that there's a lot of East Coast influence on it. Obviously, a lot of older people that are retiring, and then the Floridians that are their own type. And I'm glad I was exposed to that, but I also realized, like, I never felt in Florida like I almost instantly felt when I got out here. And I said, okay, I feel better here. And I'm glad that I had that experience. And, like, living in central Illinois, I had 2 years there surrounded by cornfields. We were 2 hours from Indy, Chicago, and St. Louis. So, yes, I could get to a city. I could go to a show or a baseball game or something like that. But I was also in a sea of cornfields. I'm glad I had that experience. Harvest time, like September into October, was really interesting in a rural part of the country that had, county fairs and things like that the community would come out to. But I needed to get out of there after 2 years, and to go from that after a little bit of a downtime to Denver, and I'm living downtown, and everything that Colorado has to offer has been just such an adjustment. And I'm glad that I've seen all these different things, and I'm glad that I have now networks. Like, I have people in Florida that if I go back, there's people to hang out with and see the state with. I got people in mountain towns here in Colorado now that I'm so thankful that I have these people that are living very different lives from me that I can connect with and bond with, and they can teach me things about that lifestyle, and I can teach them things about what it's like growing up in one of the biggest cities in the world and how that changes the way you look at things. And that's how I'm growing, I think, as I age. Just being exposed to different types of people.
Do you think growing up in Chicago gave you a vast appreciation for diversity?
Absolutely, 100%. And there's something about, and I think you guys will relate to this too, when you live in a place that gets cold, and I mean like cold, and winter's long and dark. I mean, we're so fortunate here, the sun's out even in February. You'll go weeks at times in Chicago in March and February and April, and it's cold and gray. It toughens you up as a person. It makes you appreciate when the sun comes out more. I think similarly to diversity. Again, knowing your neighbors, and this neighbor is from Greece, and a couple blocks down they're from Italy, and people that were just trying to raise their families and have a good life for their kids. Being around that was really good for me. And you'd walk to the grocery store and you'd see every type of person on the planet. You'd see people that were doing well and people obviously that weren't. Homeless, transients, and they're all sort of intersecting with each other. It was very eye-opening for me, and it's conversely been eye-opening that I can walk down the street in Denver and only see white people, for example. Like, my walk home from work, it's a mile from office to my front door. I might not pass a single person going home that isn't white and in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s working downtown. And it's even more so, I feel like, when we get up in the mountains, and it's just even more so that way. So that's interesting. But then this campus is, I think, one of the most diverse areas in all of Denver. You see a lot of different types of people on this campus. At MSU Denver, the average student age is 26. We've got DACA students, first-generation college students, veterans back from war. Very, very interesting mix of people that I think we lose a little bit of that when we even cross Spear into town, and it's a little bit more of the same.
Yeah. And when you're up in the mountains and you seeing non-white people, you're always like, how'd you get here?
Yeah, kind of, but that's interesting though. Like, what brought you up here, or how did, especially if they're living in one of those communities, how I met someone last week who lives in this tiny town in northern Montana. I mean, way up near the Canada border, and she's from Thailand. And I'm thinking, how on earth do you go from Thailand to northern Montana? And hearing her story and just thinking about that. I mean, my mom is from a village in Northern Ireland that the day she was born was the day the village got electricity. I mean, and we've been back, and it's like it's stuck in time. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's a beautiful, amazing place in rural Ireland.
So you're first generation?
Well, my mom's from Ireland. My dad's dad was from Ireland.
Okay.
And so my dad's from one of the biggest cities in the world, born and raised in the south side of Chicago. My mom is from this little village in Northern Ireland. Somehow they met in Chicago. And obviously they stuck together. I got two older brothers. I'm the youngest. They've been married for over 30 years and doing awesome. But just thinking about, how did she end up in Chicago? And how did this woman I met the other week end up from Thailand going to northern Montana? And hearing their stories, it's amazing. And again, there's a lot of courage in that. My mom, for her to leave everything behind, and literally everything behind, to come to America with no idea other than she thought she'd have more opportunities in America than she'd have in Northern Ireland in the 60s and 70s, I can't imagine that. And I look back, okay, I moved 1,000 miles west. I'm a 2-hour flight from home. I can FaceTime my parents or friends. Maybe it's not that courageous coming out this way, but I want to honor that spirit a little bit too and say she did it do it, Ronan. And I felt that way when I went to Tampa. I was scared out of my mind going to Florida at 22, not knowing anybody and not even knowing myself. But do it. And I made a lot of mistakes in Florida, and I grew from it, and I'm better because of it. And I've tried to take that all the way through to here.
Like bath salts mistakes?
No, just, man, I just work stuff primarily. And but Florida's, you know.
Well, you know what they say about Florida. The more north you get, the more south you actually are.
It's bizarre, and I'm not trying to belittle the good folks of Florida. I met some great people there, and friends that I still have, but it just wasn't for me. And I knew that almost right away. I got a sense that just some of the values it definitely wasn't Midwest people. You know, it had that urgency of the East Coast, and then mixed up in with being 100 degrees and humid. Just sort of this weird, and you never get a break from that. At least in New York and Boston, you get winter, and fall, of course, is beautiful. You never really get that break in Florida, and there's so many people down there, and it's not for me.
You ever go to A.B.R. City?
Oh, yeah. I liked A.B.R. City a lot, actually, and Cuban sandwich, and I liked that part of Florida. I liked kind of being exposed to being around Cubans. That I didn't have a lot of experience with that. Haitians, like that was different for me. That I never really had that in Bloomington, Indiana. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But overall, it wasn't a place that I saw myself at long term. Whereas when I got here, I'm like, yeah, if I can make it work, I could be here for a very long time.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to the Keys when you were down there?
No, I never got down there, and that's a bit of a regret, just because it's such a unique part of America. You know, you're out in the ocean, and I'd like to see that sometime. Yeah, I hear it's a good party town too.
Yeah.
So
I've never been.
I'll get there at some point.
I love key lime pie. So
there you go.
So you said that when you went to Florida, you kind of almost knew instantly it wasn't your type of place, and you were saying before that, you know, when you got into the media industry, you were kind of all over the place on the East Coast. Was there places, and I know you said Florida was one of them, that when you got that opportunity, you were like, yeah, I'm not too sure about that place, but I'm going to take it so I can get this opportunity and get this experience?
Well, Tampa, for sure, was, I don't know, do I really want to live there? The athletic department, they're a mid-major in the sense that at USF, in my experiences and what I've seen, a lot of people don't stay at USF. You use it as an opportunity to jump to Miami or the University of Florida or Florida State or whatever, you know, jumping to a bigger school. The people that tended to stay there, and I'm not trying to generalize everybody, but they were people that were just content, sort of, this is good. So I was frustrated, too, by maybe the lack of vision and the lack of empathy I got from a lot of employees there who didn't seem to have any interest in ensuring that I was okay. You know, like this young man just moved here. He doesn't know anybody. He's putting in 80-plus hour work weeks without a single day off. Maybe someone should check in on him and say, hey, why don't you take Sunday off and go to the beach? No one ever really looked out for me. And I think look, I got to look out for myself, but I was waiting for someone to kind of mentor me or help me, and it never happened. So I got isolated maybe kind of quickly down there. I was really nervous about going to Normal, Illinois, too. One, I wasn't the best student in undergrad. I was so focused on, like, I was the C's get degrees. No one is going to hire me or not hire me based on my GPA. So I need to get this piece of paper. But what I really need to do is get on air as much as possible, tell these stories, interview people, build up my media skill set. So I wasn't looking forward to going back into class again. And that changed. I really liked Normal. I couldn't live there long term, but I really liked that people there cared about each other. I felt like my teachers were engaged with me. I was also in 20 people classrooms instead of 400 people classrooms at IU. But I built personal relationships with my teachers. I appreciated school more, and I really had a good time, even though I was ready to leave at the end of 2 years. So those moves were sort of different. And then Denver I was scared about not knowing anybody, and would I succeed? You know, I built up Denver to be this thing. I was scared of coming out here and messing up or not making it work and having that be a failure. And after all those years of loving this vision of the West and the mountains, feeling like I let myself down if it didn't work out. So I think I use that as motivation to challenge myself to say yes to things maybe I wouldn't have done 2 years before I got here. I want to stay in tonight, but someone is actually asking me to come out and grab a beer or whatever, so go and do it, And that's hard. I'm very introverted until I'm around people that I like, and then I tend to be the opposite.
I'm the same.
It's a weird dynamic. It's hard for people to understand that, and it can be hard to meet people with that, but I wanted this to be an opportunity. Like, you're in your late 20s, single, you've got nothing holding you back. Just go for it. And I'm so thankful I did. And again, I think about the people I've met here, and I go, if I had not done that, these people would never be in my life and never would have been exposed to them. I was at a friend's house up in Boulder a little bit after I moved here, a family of musicians. And we had a barbecue, grill's going, there's dogs running around the yard. All of a sudden, a guitar comes out, the piano rolls out, there's a violin, and there's just the jam in the yard. And I'm like, I never really experienced that back home. And it just felt like this is something I always wanted to be a part of, that type of a community. And I remember having those moments sitting around like a fire and people are just singing or telling stories and going, this is really, really cool. This is why I'm here, And with regards to work, it's seeing a student who comes in terrified of hearing their own voice, and after a couple of weeks or months here, they've got a podcast that they're loving, and they're interviewing people they never would have been able to talk to if they didn't have this platform to talk to somebody. That's so rewarding. And I never got that in broadcasting. Like, it was fun. Remember the first gig I did that was on TV live in Chicago, which was like the dream forever. I was on the same channel that the Cubs are on in Chicago, and my family and friends could all watch it. Great sense of pride from that. It really pales in comparison, though, to working with a student who may be dealing with really difficult things outside of school, and I'm the connection that is helping them get comfortable on campus. Or maybe for whatever reason, they feel like they can come and talk to me, and suddenly I'm helping somebody that isn't just me. That it's changed my whole perspective on what I value, and I think it has set the tone for me moving forward on what the rest of my life is going to look like.
So saying, sports media was your goal and you were in it and you were on the channel that the Cubs were on, obviously a goal. And then you kind of changed paths and you went to higher ed. Do you think higher ed is the end game for you, or do you have other goals and visions beyond that?
That's a great question. I'm sorting that out internally right now. If there was I've always been drawn to teaching, and the opportunity to teach here has just solidified that. So one of the things I weigh all the time is go and get a PhD and, teach for the that's a very noble profession, I think. There's a lot of concerns I have with that too, stopping where I'm at right now.
Being able to pay your bills.
Yeah, exactly right. And then, so I get a degree, and then I may have to go. It's just like broadcasting, where you don't get to just stay. I couldn't just stay in Colorado necessarily, and if I did, the odds of it being in the Front Range is unlikely. So am I prepared at 40, maybe a couple years down the road, to be living in Grand Junction with a ton of debt, making $50K? Like, yes, the job I like, but is that where I want to be at? So what I'm sorting out basically right now is I think I've got a skill set that I can apply to a lot of different industries. And what I need to find is that perfect mix between I'm building off what I've done up to this point, but I'm also in a position that it's not just about making money for a business or for myself. I have to be a part of something that's bigger than me, or it's not going to work. So I'm figuring that out, and I don't know what's going to come next. I know I've got a pretty good idea of the limitations of what I can do at MSU Denver in terms of what will be here for me and what won't. And, I'm going to see where the road takes me with that in mind. But I wish it were easier for me to transition into teaching right now, because it's right at the core of so many things that I value. And I love preparing lectures. I love the relationship with a student in the classroom is very different than what I have with students that are working up here. I think I understand the student experience better seeing both sides of it. Students are working up here, they're paying to go to class. down there. And every year that I get removed from my undergrad or graduate experience, I'm further removed from what college students in this year are dealing with, what the struggles are like, what the environment in the classroom is like. So I'm feeling like I'm staying connected to that by getting the chance to teach and having students say, hey, this is working or this isn't. That's valuable to me, and I can adjust according. So long answer there, but I don't know. I don't know what's coming. I'm just trying to focus on what I'm doing here right now and seeing what comes because of that. And it's going to work out, you know? And I think, like I said, having good communication skills, having good technology skills, you can apply that to so many different industries. And that's what I try to preach to students here. And it's something I should take to heart myself too and go, you don't just have to be a teacher to teach people. There's a lot of different ways you can teach people in a employment situation. And preferably whatever is next will have a window. Because I go crazy here in the summer when storms are rolling in off the mountains, and I
miss them.
I can't see it. So we'll see, you know. And in the meantime, class starts in 10 days, and we'll have 150 students rolling up here starting on the 19th, and we've got a lot to do to make this a good environment for them.
Right on.
Yep.
I do have one question completely off topic,
Awesome.
but we've mentioned it a couple times. Him and I are kind of on the same page. How does one ever get into a jam band? Like, that's something that him and I, for whatever reason, like, that just, I've never been drawn to it. Like, I could name maybe a handful of Grateful Dead songs, and they're all like the poppy, you know, like radio friendly ones. So I like to hear people, like, how they get into certain types of music, because there's so many different types out there, and sometimes people are into things that you would never expect them to be into. And I really didn't get into country music until much, you know, into my 30s. And I still haven't been able to really, like, it doesn't resonate with me. So was that something you got into as a kid, or was it a college thing?
You know, it's interesting that the band that got me into the jam scene, if you talk to jam band fans, they're going to say that is not a jam band, and I agree with them, actually. But my story with it is 1998, my oldest brother went to... Great year. Cubs won the wild card. It was a good time for me at 11 years old. My brother was... I know. My brother was a freshman at the University of Illinois down in Champaign. And he came back fall break or something with Dave Matthews Band, live at Red Rocks. So he was into it. A lot of college students in 1998 were into Dave Matthews Band. He came back. I'd never heard anything remotely close to it. One, you had the violin and the sax playing off each other. That was unique. But what I also started to realize is, you know, they wouldn't play the same set every night. So you'd have, if there were 2 shows on back-to-back days, there were 2 very different concerts. So that got me in, and I think it was a great introduction to that community. It's a community where fans can tape concerts. So the music you would listen to, I started with an official CD release live at Red Rocks, but then I'd go on Napster or something, and there was a fan recording of an Alpine Valley show or SPAC in New York, and it's like, fans just show up with recordings, and you're allowed to do that and listen to it. And then you find that with jam bands, the song is different from night to night depending on who has the solo, or even you get a sense of what mood is that musician in. Is that an aggressive solo? Is it more laid back? So the concerts are changing and evolving night to night. So that opened me up to Phish, and that opened me up to the Grateful Dead, and on and on and on and on from that. And what I like about the jam band community is the fans have a reputation of being difficult, but I think they're some of the most loyal fans of anything in the world. People will travel to see bands play. They will trade music. You build a sense of community through that. And I'll give you a perfect example. DMB, for me now, I have an interesting relationship with them. They're clearly past their peak. 2 founding members in the band. One has passed away. The other's been kicked out of the band. I still see them about twice a summer. And I don't listen to a lot of them when I'm not at shows anymore, but maybe it's nostalgic for me, whatever. I like to go see them back-to-back nights and hear 2 totally different sets. But there's this venue in Wisconsin called Alpine Valley. I've been going with a group of people since 2003. 2 nights just about every summer. We all live in different parts of the country now. Some people are married. Some people, have had different girlfriends kind of come and go. But we have our 2 nights every summer. We go up to the middle of the woods in south central Wisconsin, and we tailgate for about 8 hours, and then we go to the show both nights.
Sounds like a mancation.
It's incredible. But there's people I've been seeing there for 15 years. And maybe I don't talk to them until next July when we're back out at Alpine again. And how are you doing? What happened the last year? That really drew me into it. So I think nowadays, too, with Spotify, you're inundated with music. With YouTube, you can watch concerts in high definition on your TV at home. It's almost overwhelming to get into new music because of that. But you can also, if you find a band that you're locked into, you can dive into it immediately. And back in the day, we would trade. We called it B&Ps, where I went to a DMB at the United Center in downtown Chicago. Someone recorded it. I would send them blank CDs. They would burn their audience recording of it onto it, send it back to me. Nowadays, it's torrenting and things like that, but there's still a community of people that some of whom I've never met that I've been talking to for over 10 or 15 years trading music with. And I get a message, hey, Ronan, I just got a message today. He knows I'm a fan of the band. They were in the 60s and 70s. There's this new podcast that goes into the history of the band. Check it out. I've met this guy once in my life. We've been talking for 15 years.
That's awesome.
And he sent this to me, and now I got something to listen to for the drive up this weekend. So that would be a great place to start. I mean, it's hard with, Grateful Dead is, how do you even begin with the Grateful Dead with their catalog spanning 40 years? But if you can appreciate the community aspect of it, and if you can find some jam band fans that don't push you away instantly, once you're in that community, it's so real. And it's good people, And I like bands that don't play the same set every night. I like bands that you're giving me incentive to go on the road and see you. Okay, I'll reward you for that by going to 4 or 6 shows a summer instead of just 1.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Dave Matthews Band. My question to you is, when you see the lineup for Red Rocks, what jam bands are getting you to go to Red Rocks or getting you excited that they're coming to Colorado?
This is interesting. Of all the jam bands I've seen out here, most of them have not actually been at Red Rocks. It's been the smaller, the Fox up in Boulder, obviously here in town, the Ogden, Bluebird. Gothic is my favorite theater here in Denver. It's an incredible place down in Englewood. But the bands that I've kind of really been getting into, the Chris Robinson Brotherhood. And, of course, they just broke up.
The guy from the Black Crowes?
Yeah.
Yep, lead singer from the Black Crowes. What's interesting with him and that band is his lead guitarist, a man named Neil Cassell, was the lead guitarist in maybe my favorite band of all time, Ryan Adams and the Cardinals. So I've been following this guy's music for 15 years. That band exploded in a real public way. And now he's playing with Chris Robinson, and they're going on a hiatus right now. Circles Around the Sun is an awesome jam band that no vocals. So it's not for somebody who is unsure about jam bands, because it's literally 2 hours of just jamming. Yeah. And the songs are 20, 25 minutes. They segue into each other. That's certainly one to keep an eye on. And then what I've been trying to look at now are just sort of that next wave. There's a great Denver band, Dog City Disco. Their drummer actually works at iPie downstairs here. Awesome guy. Seen them a couple of times here in town. They just have a great energy to them. Happy people up there making music that makes you feel good, and you can still catch them, at least for now, for $10 at the Larimer Lounge. So they're the local band that I'm rooting for the hardest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective on jam bands. I told you earlier in the week that we went to Arise, and we were there for like 10 minutes and looked at each other and was like,
we're out of our element.
Yeah, totally out of our element. But our buddy Drew, lead singer of Satsong, they played, and in my opinion, they stole the show. We really didn't pay attention to any of the other bands. I think that was one of those things that maybe a little research, maybe checking out the bands before we went would have helped us out. I don't know if I'm ever going to another festival again, though, I'll be honest with you.
I will.
Interesting. I'm not a big festival guy. I don't like the dynamics of music festivals. This is going to be the snobbiest thing I say to you today. I also don't like music in places that are not designed for music. baseball
dirty,
stadiums,
dusty fields.
big dusty fields. Yeah, where everything's flat and the
Like, there's
sound.
grass right over there. Why are we dancing in dirt?
But the sound too just sort of drifts off into the night. There's been a big push in recent years of like baseball stadiums. Tonight, actually, at Coors, I think Billy Joel is tonight and Zach Brown is tomorrow. But that facility is, and I think it's a beautiful place for a baseball game. It's not designed for music, so it's just about cramming as many people as possible into a place that has kind of a cool hook. That's Coors Field, beautiful baseball venue. That's not my scene, unfortunately. So give me the Gothic theaters, the Ogdens, those places. Especially like those old movie houses that opened in the 20s. The Oriental Theater up in the Berkeley neighborhood. Yeah. Amazing place. And I actually, a couple weeks ago, I went to see Fish Jam Band play a live concert at Alpine Valley, my favorite venue in the world. They were live streaming it for free at the Oriental. So there were about 100 of us in there on a Sunday night, just strolled right into the old neighborhood, old movie theater to watch a live stream of this concert on the other part of the country. And people in there were dancing and singing and drinking, and everybody's having a good time. And it's like, wow, look at these people are. You don't get that, I think, from the non-jam band community, where they were so into it, they so wanted to be part of the scene that they're willing to watch a live airing of it.
Is that like a thing?
Yeah, and more. I wish more bands would do that. You're also seeing more and more like live streaming on YouTube, free live concerts.
Coachella.
But it's better to be in a theater.
Yeah.
And like the people around you are dancing or reacting. That concert for Fish, they played a couple of songs they hadn't played in over 20 years. And you hear one note at the very beginning of the song, and the guy next to me is like, oh my gosh, they haven't played this since 95. And it's like that guy is so in tune to this. And I think that resonates with me because the things I'm interested in, it's like all or nothing for me. Baseball, music, the hiking and all that. Now I'm either super into it or I'm not a casual fan of a lot of things. And that rubs people the wrong way, sure. But I also build great friendships with people who share that passion. Big pet peeve of mine is, someone says, hey, let's go to a show tonight. I want to be there for the first song. I want to see the whole concert play out. I'm not the kind of guy to go to a show with, and if you want to talk a lot, because I'm there to listen to what's going on. Not to say I can't talk to you. It's just if your intention is to go there and talk, we're not at the right thing. So let's just know that. And that rubs some people the wrong way, but other people get that. And like a baseball game, I'm going to be there for first pitch. I'm not showing up in the fifth inning or something like that. And to people who do that, that's cool. That's your thing. But
are you staying to the last out?
For the Cubs, never leave early. Rockies, I'm a little bit more. Yes, when I can, I stay to the end. If it's a severe weather thing, if it's a 15-inning game on a Tuesday night, and I don't really care if the Rockies win or lose. I'm there just because I like the feel of being in a ballpark. Maybe I cut out early. But Cubs games, I've been at Wrigley. I was actually at the longest game in the history of Wrigley Field. And it was against the Rockies, interestingly enough, back in like 2014 or 15. It was right before I moved out here. Over 6.5 hours. Oh. And the Cubs were a last place team. And we stayed to the very end. We left ballpark at like 2 a.m. For a 7 o'clock first pitch. But that ballpark's been around since 1914. And I've been at the longest game in the history of that place. And I'm proud as hell of that, you know? And you see that loyalty is a good virtue, I think, to have. I think it's a really important thing to have in your life, is to be loyal about things, even if it's a little bit irrational. Be loyal about things you care about. That's a good quality to have. As
a Cubs fan, is it like sacrilege to root for the White Sox if the White Sox make it further?
A lot of people would say that.
And how does one become a Cubs fan versus a White Sox fan? Is there a dividing line, or is there a set of train tracks?
So Chicago has a reputation, and it's fairly accurate, of there's a very clear divide between the north and south side. There's no east side because that's Lake Michigan. So you got the north and south side and then the west side, but historically there's been a very real divide in terms of white and black. Caucasians or whites on the north side of Chicago, African Americans on the south side. My dad is he deviated from that. He grew up on the south side, diehard Cub fan, surrounded by Sox fans. He lived a couple blocks from Sox Park. His high school baseball field was in the shadow of Sox Park, and he was a Cub fan. So he was different from that. But There's a divide, north and south side. There's a lot of people in Chicago who it's either one or the other. I love the Cubs, therefore I hate the Sox. My philosophy has been I love the Cubs. I'm thankful the White Sox are in Chicago because we have two teams. New York has two teams, Chicago and L.A. But, those are the cities that have the luxury of having two teams in it. I could go to an American League game if I want to. People in Denver don't get the luxury of doing that. So you got to drive to Kansas City for the closest American League game from here. So I like that they're there. I don't cheer for the White Sox. If they're in the World Series, I don't want them to win. But I like that they're in Chicago, and I like that the Cubs and Sox play each other between 4 and 6 games per season, and that's it, depending on the year. The rivalry, like the Cardinals are our rival. St. Louis or Milwaukee is our rivals. Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. These are teams you play 18 to 20 times a year. Those are your rivals. The White Sox, I like the fun of it, and I'm thankful that they're in Chicago because how cool is it to have two teams in one city? And the best thing would be, and I got Cubs fans that would say, hell no, a Cubs-White Sox World Series. I really hope that happens. It happened in 1906. Wasn't around for that. Didn't end well for the Cubs either. But it would be so cool in my lifetime to see the Cubs and the White Sox as the final two teams standing. And hopefully it goes to Game 7. And, of course, I hope the Cubs win. But that would be the ultimate thing for Chicago. And Chicago's got a great baseball tradition and history. And, so, a lot of people hate the White Sox that are Cub fans or the other way around, but I don't see the value in that. I appreciate them being there.
Right on. Are you just as passionate for other Chicago sports teams, or is it just Cubs baseball?
Well, the Cubs have their own mantle, right? And that's baseball too. The sport means so much to me. I love the Bears. The Bears won a Super Bowl in '85, the '85-'86 season.
Jim McMahon, baby.
I was born in '87.
Me too.
So my whole life has been the '85. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of hearing about the '85 Bears. I've seen one Super Bowl appearance. They lost to Peyton Manning.
Super Bowl shuffle. Come on.
So I love it, but I'm sick of it, right? Like, I hope the 2016 Cubs, I hope people aren't talking about the 2016 Cubs like they still talk about the '85 Bears, meaning I hope the Cubs do something in the next 30 years.
Refrigerator Perry.
Amazing team, but I missed it, So I love the Bears. The Bulls, when I was a kid, I essentially grew up in the 90s. The Bulls won 6 titles in 8 years with arguably the best player of all time. I think that ruined me as an NBA fan because the Bulls since '98 have been one of the worst professional sports organizations in America.
Yeah, they're right up there with the Knicks.
100% right. How can the Bulls and the Knicks be this terrible year in and year out, especially in the NBA where you're not going to recruit an elite free agent to Charlotte or New Orleans? Like, you can do that theoretically in Chicago or New York with competent management. So the NBA, I've kind of soured on that. I was never a big hockey fan. When the Hawks got good in the around 2010 or so, they won 3 titles in 5 years. I didn't jump on the bandwagon because I hate those fans when they jump on the Cubs. So I didn't want to do that to the Blackhawk fans that were there through the lean years. And I went to Hawks games and the stadium was half empty, but I was never really a fan. So hockey doesn't do much for me. NBA doesn't do a whole lot for me. I love the Bears, but baseball is just so different. And the baseball, it's every day. I like the lesson in that. You lose today, who cares? Go win tomorrow. You win today, okay, you can celebrate for 30 minutes, but you got another game tomorrow. That is a great thing. And the pacing of the sport, the history. My dad as a kid went to Wrigley Field. I, as a kid, went there. My brothers have kids. Their kids are now going to the same place that their grandfather went to. Down the road, if I have a family and kids, I hope to bring them to Wrigley Field. And I hope it's there in 100 years because that's history and tradition, and there's a sense of community. I see people in Denver. I'm out hiking. Someone sees my Cubs hat. Hey, man, go Cubs. We talk for 5 or 10 minutes. They're from Chicago, or they went to Wrigley as a kid. How cool to have that. Whereas, I'll wear Illinois State apparel and people won't even, what's that? They think I'm wearing a St. Louis. Exactly. They think I'm wearing a St. Louis shirt. So I like that. And I see it here in Denver with, the Broncos. There's tremendous pride in this city with that football team that generations after generation, people that it's in their blood, and I respect that. Bears are here week 2 this year. So I look forward to fighting with some Broncos fans around then. But I think that's cool when you have something in your family that goes from a grandparent to a son or daughter and then on and on and on down. And if you can go to a physical place that your grandfather went to, I think you can take a minute to appreciate that. And we get that here too, like with outdoors. If you're a hiker and you're hiking the same mountain your grandfather did when he first moved to Colorado, you can feel a connection to that person even if they're long gone, and that's important.
I've never looked at it from that standpoint. I'm not really a traditional sports fan, and I've never looked at it generation. I know based on the sports that I watch, I associate certain places with certain people, right? MMA, pro wrestling. Richie's going to bat his eyes at this one, but you're from Chicago.
Yeah.
You a CM Punk fan? You know who CM Punk is?
I do know CM Punk. I've actually seen him at Wrigley in his jorts,
Nice.
throwing out the first pitch. Yeah, he's got a huge presence in the city. Wrestling has a wonderful tradition in Chicago.
Very big in Chicago.
Yeah.
Oh.
The amateur wrestling, too. You know, your Friday night, you go to a local, it's like a field house, and there's a ring set up and maybe 50 people in the crowd, but they're out there doing their thing. There's a big, actually, community of female wrestlers in Chicago,
Okay.
and I got friends that are involved in they're into that, and it's cool. Not to deviate, I'm sorry if you were trying to finish your thought.
No.
Roller derby,
Okay.
huge deal still back in Chicago.
Really?
Oh yeah, and females that are into roller derby. I don't know that I've ever even heard that in Colorado. I don't know if there's a rink or an arena. Granted, I haven't really looked, but it's it's still a big part of the culture, I think, in parts of Chicago for sure. And I've got a friend who's a ref.
Okay.
He's a roller derby ref, and he's out there and they're throwing elbows, and I've always sort of linked that sort of with wrestling. It's kind of in that sphere of that performance art and sport. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Was there a place there called a Rosemont? Was that a building?
Rosemont's a community.
Okay.
Yeah. Very interesting history in Rosemont. Yeah.
Because I know it's escaping my brain right now, but I know there's like one or two buildings that were really big for pro wrestling back in the day in Chicago.
The Rosemont Horizon. Yep. Which it's now called the Allstate Arena. It was an awesome dumpy venue.
Yeah.
And then Allstate dumped a ton of money into it. It's nicer now, but I liked it better when it was dumpy. It's right by O'Hare. It's a big airport.
Okay.
Rosemont is one of the cities in the Chicago burbs with mob ties still. The Stevenson family, and they've been the mayor forever. They own the convention center. They own the whole town. There's only about 3,000 people that live in Rosemont. They've got a casino. They've got a 18, maybe Rosemont Horizon's not quite that big, maybe a 16,000 seat stadium.
Okay.
They've got independent league baseball, hotels, convention centers. It's a very weird place, and it's got this mob history sort of connected to it. But yeah, Rosemont. They just had a big wrestling event like a year ago there.
All in. Yeah. So
yeah.
Not to nerd out too much.
I had a buddy at that.
Yeah, there's pretty much another organization that Tony Khan, his father, owns, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're getting into the wrestling business, and that was kind of their first just testing it out, and they're debuting in October on TNT. I won't nerd out anymore because I know Richie doesn't want to hear that. But
go with it.
yeah, Chicago is a really big wrestling state for sure. And Rosemont Horizon, just a fun little fact, is Stone Cold Steve Austin's was his favorite place to wrestle.
Really?
Yeah.
I saw one of the best concerts of my life in that place, and what I really like about it, the roof is wood, like the inside ceiling, so the acoustics at a concert, unbelievable, and it's loud. I mean, because it was built just before the surge of suites, so the upper deck isn't 3 or 4 extra stories high because they have to put in all the luxury seating. The upper deck is like right on top of the basketball court or hockey rink, depending on the event going on in there, and it gets loud. I love that place. The Chicago Bulls play in the United Center downtown, big NBA and hockey rink. It's just the difference between both places, and the seating capacity difference is only like 3,000. It's night and day. So I love the old Rosemont Horizon. I remember the first time I went there was the Harlem Globetrotters in like 1995, and they had these murals on the concourse that's all been painted over now with advertising. They had like rose petals all over the inside of this weird, funky old building. Really cool place. I hope it sticks around. And the concert I was at was in December of 2003. I was in high school at the time. And the concert started at about 7 p.m. and ended 1:30. Right in the middle of December, and people were tailgating. After the show, people were throwing Frisbees in the parking lot, and you're right by O'Hare, so you have these massive, international planes just buzzing right over the top. Really, really cool place. So if you ever get to Chicagoland and you have an excuse to go to Rosemont, it's worth seeing. There's just not a lot of stuff like that anymore. And every arena that's built now is the first thing to think about is luxury space, and then the common folk. And that really takes away from the experience, I think. Quick aside, Steve Haig, our boss here, the director of student media, he was in Chicago a couple weeks ago, and he went to Wrigley Field. And beforehand, he was texting me like, where should I sit, all this stuff. The biggest thing that he said to me was he was sitting in the second to last row of the upper deck at Wrigley Field. And he goes, this is closer than anywhere I've sat in the front of the upper deck at Coors. Because the way they built stadiums 100 years ago isn't like they do it now. They didn't think about luxury suites or anything like that. And when he texted me that, I said, that's awesome to hear you say that, because it's hard for me to describe that to people here. My favorite seats at any arena, stadium in the whole world is the front of the upper deck behind home plate at Wrigley Field. There's nothing like that. And here, the same equivalent seats here, you're way higher up and you're way further back. And it's hard for people to visualize that until they see it. Yeah.
Yeah, you get that kind of feel in soccer stadiums.
Mm-hmm.
Where you almost feel like you're going to fall out of your seat, but they want that so you feel close to the field and get the experience, and there's no bad seat in the house kind of mindset.
Yeah. And I think that's great. And now, there's thousands of seats in Coors Field that you're way off the field. And that's fine if I like going there. I'm not knocking the place. It's just people who go to Coors and then go to Wrigley, you can't compare the two, and I like both. Yeah.
I appreciate your appreciation for Chicago and your pride in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's awesome. We're running out of studio time right now. Before we get you out of here, you had mentioned when you go in the woods, you like to listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 or 5 podcasts that you'd like to, the listeners should check out.
Yeah, well, I know this is no secret to us. Joe Rogan Experience, not that I need to tell people to listen to it. It's just if you have this feeling of him, I'd say give it a shot. I was trying to get my brothers into it, and they're like, oh, no, that's the guy from Fear Factor. His comedy sucks. I go, just try, and they're starting to come around a little bit. And even if they don't agree with him, and that's not what I'm looking for, it's the diversity of guests. So that's a big one.
Bernie Sanders the other day.
Yeah, no, and I was actually listening to that the other day and going, how cool is it that you have a presidential candidate that can lay out his platform uninterrupted for over an hour? And Joe wasn't pushing back a whole lot, but that's fine. At least I know where Bernie stands. Much better than I did based on what I would see on CNN or Fox or anything else that exists. There's tremendous value in that. And so definitely a big fan of that. I love Chris Ryan. He's an author. He's actually in Colorado right now, zigzagging through the state. Yeah, he had a meetup Sunday in Boulder. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to it, but I'm hoping he does one more. That's a really good one. And then this is kind of out of left field a little bit. I have gotten in a bit of a kick recently listening to, you remember Old Loveline? Adam and Dr. Drew back in the day. They've teamed up again on like a 40-minute podcast daily where it's just Adam and Dr. Drew and they take phone calls. And I don't think as much as from some of the other podcasts, but I've been getting a kick out of some of the rants he's been going on, and just maybe that's nostalgic for me. I remember as a kid listening to Q101 back in Chicago, and it was Loveline, and all the things I learned about the human body as a 9-year-old. To kind of revisit that has been very interesting, and I'm enjoying it at least. So maybe worth checking out, but definitely Joe Rogan and Chris Ryan. He'll expand your thought process, I think, if you give him a listen. And it's not for everybody, but I like that open-mindedness that he has. And then, of course, you guys,
Thanks.
and media in general. We got some interesting podcasts coming out of this room. And we got a new website, so hop online, mymetmedia.com, and see what we have to offer.
Mm-hmm. And then one other thing we like to do, we're always trying to give people tips, hacks, little things that they can do, upgrade their life and make their life better. do you have any daily practices or rituals that you try to adhere to on a regular basis, be it, standing in the grass for 10 minutes or, being in media and stuff like that, or in writing? Do you have any journal practices, anything?
Here's one. It's not daily, but it's something that, I think I got this from Corolla, actually. Birthday. He goes, once you're like 21, what are you celebrating? He's really put off by adults who celebrate birthdays. Like, you're not 10 anymore. So he goes, why don't you do something useful with your birthday? And this is something that I have done. Use your birthday as an opportunity, an excuse to audit your last year. So I actually have a whiteboard, and I'll write down goals that I accomplished over the last year. And it could be anything from financial, a relationship, it could be health. I hiked X number of trails or this many miles, whatever the case may be for you, and put it down on paper and maybe set some goals for the next year. What's something that you didn't do last year that you want to do next year, and hold yourself accountable to that. So instead of me getting into my 30s going, oh, another birthday, come celebrate with me, I instead take that as an opportunity to go, well, what did I accomplish in my 31st year? And what do I want to do a year from now that I can use this as a goal for? And I think that is good for me. I'm not judging against adults who want to go out and party because they're 40. That's great. It's just, I think it's useful to look back on your year and break it into different categories. Again, financial, education, work, relationships with friends, relationships with partners, and set the goals you have for the next year and then track it. And you can see, I've been doing that since I got out to Colorado. And the things I've chosen to highlight in my first year, I remember hiking 10 times was a huge jump off what I'd ever done before that. And then in comparison now, 10 for me that'd be a bad year. That would be, I'm not getting out enough. So it's interesting how that changes and with your personality and as you age. So that's something that I do. Another thing I'm working on, I'm really good about shutting down the phone when I'm hiking or camping, but trying to find time every day that this hour window, there's no distractions getting to me. My phone's going off. Maybe it's while I'm cooking dinner or eating, but not falling on that crutch of it's very easy to scroll through your phone while you're eating dinner. I think it's a terrible habit. And enjoy the food you're eating. Be present in what you're doing instead of constantly distracting yourself. So that's what I need to work on next, is not just saving that for the mountain trips and retreat days, but incorporate that to every single day so that you have this period of time where you're not inundated with alerts and updates and buzzing and all that stuff. Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you for your time. This was an awesome interview. Airey Bros, appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you guys a lot. I'm really happy that you had the courage to come in the door the first time. It's the biggest thing that students are afraid to do. You walk through that door, it looks like everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody's got a job. How do I break into that? Just do it. And once you come in, most people stay. So I'm just really happy with what you guys are doing. The guests you've brought in, I'm very eager to see where this goes. But also the relationships you're building in the office with some different people that they're maybe paying attention to what you're doing. Or, we've got an employee here in the office that's training with you because they met you and there's a connection there and they see the value in what you bring. I love to see that. And I hope everybody's network grows because of that. And thank you guys for your time. I hope it was good.
It was awesome.
And we'll do it again down the road sometime.
Hell yeah.
I'll be able to answer that question in a couple years about what I'm up to, and we'll revisit it.
Yep.
It was an honor and pleasure. Thank
you,
you,
Ronan.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.